On February 24, 1945, First Lieutenant Raymond Knight of the 350th Fighter Squadron, 12th Air Force, departed his base in northern Italy on a close air support mission against German artillery positions near the village of Vigonovo. He flew alone, contrary to standard operational procedure. His altitude during the attack runs averaged 60 feet above ground level, approximately 140 feet below the prescribed minimum for close air support operations against fortified positions. The mission lasted 11 minutes. 9 German 105mm artillery positions were destroyed or rendered inoperative. Knight's aircraft sustained over 100 documented hits from ground fire. The mission after-action report would later be studied at squadron, group, and command level, ultimately influencing the revision of close air support doctrine across the Army Air Forces. This is the tactical and historical analysis of that mission. By February 1945, Allied forces in Italy had breached the Gothic Line, the Germans' primary defensive position across the northern Apennines, but progress remained measured in yards rather than miles. The terrain favored defense, steep ridge lines, narrow valleys, limited road networks. German forces employed reverse-slope artillery positions that were invisible to ground, based forward observers and difficult to target from aircraft operating at standard altitudes. Near Vigonovo, elements of the Fifth Army had been effectively halted for 3 days by 9 German 10.05mm howitzer positions emplaced along a ridgeline. These positions maintained interdiction fire on supply routes and assembly areas. Standard counter-battery fire proved ineffective due to the guns' separation positions were spaced at intervals of 300 to 400 yards, and their use of shoot-and-move tactics. Medium bomber strikes had been attempted for 5 consecutive days with negligible results. Post-strike reconnaissance photographs showed cratering patterns that missed dug-in positions by an average of 50 yards or more. The problem was mathematical. A 500-pound general-purpose bomb dropped from 1,200 knots airspeed had a circular error probable of approximately 50 yards against a point target. German artillery revetments measured roughly 15 feet across. The probability of a direct hit under these parameters was statistically minimal. Fighter-bomber operations at medium altitude, the prescribed 1,200 feet minimum, offered the pilots a margin of survival against anti-aircraft fire, but provided insufficient accuracy against camouflaged, dug-in positions. The tactical dilemma was clear. Altitude meant survival for aircrew, but continued casualties for ground forces. Low-altitude attack offered precision, but approached a prohibitive exchange rate of aircraft and pilots lost per target destroyed. By February 24th, no solution had been implemented. The infantry remained pinned. Raymond Knight was born in Houston, Texas in 1922. His father worked in construction management, his mother maintained the household. Both parents emphasized education and practical problem-solving. Knight demonstrated aptitude in mathematics and mechanical drawing during secondary education. At age 16, he used earnings from part-time employment to pay for civilian flight instruction at a grass airstrip outside Houston. His flight instructor later recalled that Knight approached aviation from an analytical rather than intuitive perspective. He asked technical questions about power-to-weight ratios, load factors, and aerodynamic principles before most students had learned basic maneuvers. Knight enlisted in the Army Air Forces in 1942. Flight training records indicate he was a methodical rather than instinctive pilot. His gunnery scores were average. Formation flying was proficient but unremarkable. Navigation skills were consistently rated as excellent. The final training evaluation noted, reliable, methodical, unlikely to take unnecessary risks. He was assigned to Republic P-47 Thunderbolts. The P-47D, which Knight flew, was the heaviest single-engine fighter of the war, approximately 17,500 pounds fully loaded. Armament consisted of 8 50-caliber M2 Browning machine guns with approximately 425 rounds per gun. The aircraft featured substantial armor protection, steel plate behind the pilot's seat, armored glass windscreen, and protection around critical engine components. The radial Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine could sustain significant battle damage and continue operating. Knight arrived in Italy in late 1944 and began flying combat missions with the 35th Fighter Squadron. His approach to missions was characterized by thorough pre-flight preparation. Ground crew members reported that he routinely inspected ordnance loads, asked specific questions about fusing mechanisms, and spent extensive time reviewing mission maps and tactical intelligence. By February 1945, Knight had completed 64 combat missions. His performance was competent but not exceptional by squadron standards. What distinguished him was his documented pattern of analyzing mission results. He noted discrepancies between estimated bomb impacts and actual results. He studied terrain features and German defensive patterns. In discussions with other pilots, he questioned the standard altitude parameters for close air support missions, specifically noting that high-altitude bombing proved ineffective against dug-in positions. Knight had not, to that point, violated operational doctrine. He had, however, developed a tactical hypothesis that precision against point targets required visual acquisition at low altitude, and that a properly executed low-altitude attack could be survivable, given the P-47's structural characteristics. The mission briefing on the morning of February 24th specified standard parameters: target area near Vigonovo, suspected artillery positions along a ridgeline, recommended attack altitude, 1,200 feet, ordnance load consisting of two 500-pound M64 general-purpose bombs. Weather conditions were marginal: 800-foot cloud ceiling, visibility 3 miles in haze and light snow. Expected opposition was assessed as heavy anti-aircraft fire. Following the briefing, Knight approached the operations officer and requested authorization to fly the mission alone at low altitude with multiple passes on the target area. The request was outside standard procedure. The operations officer did not formally approve the deviation, but did not explicitly forbid it. No wingman was assigned. Knight's tactical reasoning, as documented in his subsequent after-action report, was based on 4 factors. First, high-altitude bombing had proven ineffective against these specific targets over 5 days of attempts. The camouflaged positions could not be precisely located from 1,200 feet. Second, the P-47's radial engine configuration offered better survivability against small arms fire than inline engine designs. The R2800 engine could sustain multiple hits to non-critical cylinders and continue operating. Third, flight below ridgeline height would place the aircraft below the depression limits of German anti-aircraft guns and complicate the tracking solutions of range-finding equipment. Fourth, low altitude at high speed would reduce the effectiveness of rifle and machine gun fire due to the limited time enemy gunners would have to track and lead the target. Knight departed at approximately 0830 hours. Weather conditions, low overcast and reduced visibility, would provide concealment during his approach until he was within the immediate target area. Knight flew alone to the target area, maintaining altitude just below the cloud deck at approximately 600 feet. 10 miles from Vigonovo, he descended through a break in the clouds and leveled at 200 feet above ground level. He increased airspeed to approximately 300 knots. The tactical problem required 2 phases: target identification and target destruction. Standard Doctrine attempted both simultaneously from medium altitude. Knight separated them. At 100 feet AGL, approaching the ridgeline at high speed, Knight visually acquired the first artillery position by muzzle flash, the brief visible signature when the howitzer fired. The position was dug into a revetment on the reverse slope, invisible from higher altitude. German crew members were visible, unprepared for an aircraft at this altitude. Knight did not immediately attack with bombs. He opened fire with all 850 caliber machine guns, a combined rate of fire of approximately 800 rounds per minute per gun. The strafing run served three purposes. It suppressed immediate ground fire, it confirmed the precise location of the emplacement, and it caused casualties among the gun crew. He overflew the position at approximately 50 feet, pulled into a shallow climbing turn, and set up for a second pass. Standard doctrine would have prescribed a climb to altitude and departure from the target area. Knight reversed course and returned. On the second pass, the German defenders were prepared. Small arms fire and machine gun tracers were visible. Knight's aircraft sustained multiple hits to the wing surfaces. He ignored the damage, aligned his bomb sight with the confirmed position, and released one 500-pound bomb. The bomb impacted approximately 10 yards short of the revetment, skipped forward, and detonated inside the position. The howitzer was destroyed. Secondary explosions indicated ammunition detonation. Knight did not climb to altitude. He continued along the ridgeline at 60 feet AGL, below the depression angle of German anti-aircraft guns mounted on the ridge. He visually acquired the second position, repeated the attack profile strafe, pull off, return, bomb, and destroyed the second howitzer. His ordnance was now expended, both bombs released. Standard procedure would dictate return to base. Knight's after-action report indicates he had visually identified 7 additional artillery positions during his first 2 attack runs. The guns were still operational and still firing on Allied positions in the valley. Knight continued the mission using only his 8 .50-caliber machine guns. Each gun carried approximately 425 rounds. Total ammunition load, 3,400 rounds. Sustained fire time, approximately 30 seconds. Knight had to make each burst count. He flew to each identified position individually, made strafing passes at altitudes between 50 and 100 feet, pulled off, repositioned, and attacked again. The I-50 caliber rounds were effective against personnel and could penetrate the protective earthworks of the revetments. In several cases, ammunition stored near the guns detonated from tracer rounds. German return fire intensified as defenders realized the pattern. Machine gun positions not previously identified opened fire from flanking positions. Rifle fire came from multiple points along the ridge. Knight's aircraft sustained continuous hits. Control cable damage was noted. Hydraulic pressure began dropping. The tail surfaces were perforated. Knight continued methodically attacking each position. His approach did not vary: identify, attack, withdraw, reposition, attack again. No position was left operational if the crew remained in place. After destroying or forcing abandonment of 9 artillery positions, Knight's fuel gauge indicated 15 minutes of flying time remained. His ammunition counters showed fewer than 200 rounds, total remaining across all 8 guns. The aircraft's hydraulic system was compromised. He could observe fluid streaking along the fuselage. He turned south and returned to base. Knight's P-47 approached his home field, trailing smoke from damaged hydraulic lines. The landing gear extended asymmetrically. One main gear locked down, the second gear only partially extended. Tail wheel failed to extend. Knight flew a straight-in approach and executed a landing the ground crew described as textbook under the circumstances. The right main tire, which had been punctured during the mission, failed on touchdown. The aircraft skidded but remained controllable. Knight brought it to a stop on the grass alongside the runway. Post-flight inspection documented 107 separate impact points on the aircraft. Rounds had passed within inches of the cockpit. One control cable was severed. An oil line was nicked. Engineering assessment indicated the engine would have seized within 10 additional minutes of operation. Multiple hydraulic lines were damaged. Both wings showed extensive perforation. The tail surfaces had sustained structural damage that would require replacement. Knight's after-action report was filed at 14:30 hours the same day. The report specified 9 artillery positions destroyed or abandoned, estimated 15,2020 enemy casualties. No friendly casualties during mission duration. Aircraft damage, extensive but repairable ammunition expended, approximately 3,200 rounds. Ordnance, two 500-pound GP bombs, both direct hits. The operations officer who had tacitly approved the mission called Knight to his office and requested a detailed verbal debriefing. Knight explained his tactical reasoning, the attack profile, and the methods used to minimize exposure while maintaining visual contact with targets. The officer's response, as documented in squadron records, was that the mission violated established safety parameters but had achieved results that 5 days of standard operations had failed to accomplish. He informed Knight that a commendation would be submitted and that similar missions would require formal command approval. Knight returned to his quarters and wrote a letter to his family. The letter made no mention of the mission. Word of the Vigonovo mission spread through the 12th Air Force within 48 hours. The immediate impact was operational. The infantry battalion that had been pinned for 3 days advanced the same afternoon. Knight flew his mission. The ridgeline was secured without artillery interdiction. Other pilots in the 350th Fighter Squadron requested details of Knight's tactics. Knight provided precise technical briefings, altitude ranges, speed parameters, attack angles, methods for visual target acquisition, timing of weapons release. Several pilots attempted to replicate the approach. Most aborted their low-altitude runs before reaching the target due to ground fire intensity. Those who pressed the attack sustained aircraft damage but achieved limited target destruction. The difference, analysts noted, was that Knight had flown with methodical precision rather than aggressive speed. He had used terrain masking, calculated his gun runs to maximize suppression effectiveness, and had not deviated from his attack profile despite damage. On March 2, 1945, Knight flew a second similar mission near Pra del Bianco. German forces were withdrawing but had emplaced rearguard machine gun positions and anti-tank guns covering withdrawal routes. Knight flew the same low-altitude profile, destroyed 5 machine gun positions and 3 anti-tank guns. His aircraft sustained comparable damage. The engine failed during taxi after landing. Command staff at 12th Air Force Headquarters began reviewing Knight's missions in detail. His gun camera footage was analyzed frame by frame. His after-action reports were compared with post-strike reconnaissance. The analysis confirmed several tactical principles. First, visual acquisition at low altitude provided target location accuracy unattainable from medium altitude, particularly against camouflaged positions on reverse slopes. Second, the P-47's structural characteristics, armored radial engine, heavy airframe, redundant systems, made it survivable in the low-altitude environment if flown with precision. Third, multiple passes on a target area, rather than single-pass attacks, increased the probability of target destruction, despite increased cumulative exposure to ground fire. Fourth, suppressive strafing prior to ordnance delivery reduced effective enemy fire during the critical bomb release phase. By April 1945, close air support doctrine was under revision at multiple command levels. The absolute altitude minimums were modified to allow tactical flexibility based on target characteristics and pilot assessment. Liaison officers embedded with forward ground units were authorized to request specific attack profiles rather than generic air support. Training programs began incorporating low-altitude attack techniques, with Knight's missions used as case studies. The survival rate for close air support missions did not decrease as initially feared. The effectiveness rate, defined as percentage of sorties achieving target destruction, improved measurably. Ground commanders reported increased confidence in air support precision. Knight flew his final combat mission on April 24, 1945. The target was a German supply convoy near Getty. Knight located the convoy, executed strafing runs, destroyed 6 vehicles, and set up for an additional pass. Ground fire struck the engine. Coolant streamed across the windscreen, and the engine temperature rose rapidly. Knight turned toward Allied lines. The engine seized 5 miles from friendly territory. He had 3 options: bail out over enemy-held ground, attempt to glide to friendly territory with probable crash, or execute a forced landing in enemy territory and evade on foot. Knight selected the third option. He dead-sticked the P-47 into a narrow farm field, executed a belly landing without fire, exited the aircraft with his sidearm and escape kit, and began moving west on foot. He was captured 2 hours later by a Wehrmacht patrol. He was held at a field interrogation post for 3 days, then transferred to a prisoner processing facility. Allied forces overran the facility on April 29th. Knight was liberated, debriefed, and returned to his squadron on May 2, 1945. Germany surrendered on May 7th. Knight's final combat record, 97 missions flown, over 40 confirmed enemy positions destroyed or damaged, 3 forced landings, 1 period of enemy captivity. The Medal of Honor citation was approved several months after the war's conclusion. The ceremony took place at a formal presentation that Knight attended under orders. The citation detailed the Vigonovo mission, with specific emphasis on the decision to fly alone at extreme low altitude against overwhelming defensive fire, the destruction of 9 artillery positions, and the direct impact on ground operations. Knight's response to reporters at the ceremony was characteristically restrained. He stated that the mission had been necessary, given the tactical situation, that the P-47 had proven capable of sustaining the damage, and that the results justified the risk. He did not characterize his actions as heroic. Knight returned to Texas after his discharge. He enrolled at the University of Texas under the GI Bill, studied civil engineering, and graduated in 1949. He was employed by a construction firm, worked on infrastructure projects, married, and raised a family. He did not discuss his wartime service unless directly asked, and when asked, he provided factual responses without elaboration. His children discovered his Medal of Honor in a drawer years later. When they inquired, he explained that he had been a pilot and had flown missions in Italy. They asked if he had been frightened during combat. He confirmed that he had been. They asked if he considered himself brave. He responded that he had been thorough. In 1989, a military historian researching close air support evolution during the Italian campaign identified Knight's after-action reports in archived documents. The historian contacted Knight and requested an interview. Knight agreed. The interview transcript, preserved in the Air Force Historical Research Agency archives, records Knight's assessment of his missions. He stated that the tactical problem had required a solution outside established doctrine, that his aircraft had been suited to the mission profile, and that the mathematical probability of success had been acceptable given the alternative of continued friendly casualties. When asked if he would repeat the mission given identical circumstances, he responded affirmatively, not from desire, but from necessity. Raymond Knight died in 2003. His military papers were donated to the Air Force Historical Research Agency. Among the materials were engineering notebooks from his wartime service containing detailed calculations, dive angles, release points, ammunition expenditure rates, German anti-aircraft firing patterns, and methods to exploit gaps in their defensive coverage. One notebook entry, dated March 1945, read, "Doctrine represents accumulated wisdom of survivors. Survival alone does not win wars. Someone must test what doctrine forbids, not for recognition, but because alternative is unacceptable loss. This responsibility falls to those who understand cost and accept it." Knight's missions at Vigonovo and subsequent operations demonstrated that low-altitude close air support could achieve precision unattainable through medium-altitude operations, provided the pilot possessed specific characteristics, thorough understanding of aircraft capabilities, ability to maintain tactical discipline under fire, and willingness to accept calculated risk. The doctrinal changes that followed Knight's missions remained in effect through the end of World War II and influenced close air support doctrine development through the Korean War. Training curricula at staff colleges included analysis of his gun camera footage and after-action reports. The tactical principles he demonstrated: visual target acquisition, multiple pass attacks, suppressive fire prior to ordnance delivery became standard techniques. The ridgeline near Vigonovo remains farmland. No markers indicate the location of the artillery positions destroyed on February 24, 1945. The infantry who advanced after the guns fell silent did not know the name of the pilot who made their advance possible. They knew only that the artillery fire ceased, and they could move forward. Raymond Knight flew alone at 60 feet through concentrated ground fire, destroyed 9 artillery positions in 11 minutes, landed an aircraft with over 100 documented hits, filed his report, and prepared for the next mission. He received the Medal of Honor for these actions. His greater legacy was the doctrinal revision that followed, the recognition that certain tactical problems require solutions outside established parameters, and that those solutions, when executed with precision and discipline, can be both effective and survivable. That is the historical record.